It's great to see everybody. I'm Jane King, and I'm one of the senior researchers at Zero Hour. And I specialise in nature and the food system and the food system's impact on nature and climate. And I work with another researcher called Simon Aldridge. He helps with emissions and carbon budgets. We work very closely together. So every time something like this comes out, we analyse the hell out of it and then hopefully produce something that people can digest. But it's really great to see you all, to see some people that are activists, because I just tend to get my head stuck in a computer all day. So, but I'm going to share my screen now. So just bear with me a sec. Is that okay? Can everybody see that all right? Just shout if you can't. So we're going to go through essentially the environmental targets that have just come out, and the environmental improvement plan, which I was saying today to Pete, it shouldn't have the word improvement in it really, and probably not plan, but but we shouldn't be negative. So the environment improvement plan is the plan that's designed to achieve the targets. So we'll have a look at that and this summary of what happened. So the targets were published on December 16th last year, and Lord Benyon said when they were published in the press release, he said these targets will tackle some of the biggest pressures facing our environment. They will ensure progress on clean air, clean and plentiful water, less waste, more sustainable use of our resources, a step change in tree planting, a better marine environment, and more diverse, resilient natural environment. So I notice he says there will ensure progress. And then the improvement plan came out on the 31st of January. Rishi Sunak said protecting our natural environment is fundamental to the health and economy and prosperity of our country. And the Secretary of State said that it would transform the management of 70% of our countryside by incentivising farmers to adopt nature-friendly practices. Now that's quite important what she's saying there. She's saying 70% of our countryside. That's quite important and telling. We'll explain that a bit more in a minute. And it's going to incentivize farmers. So farmers are the focus for this. So just going to go through the key targets. I'm not going through all of the targets, just the ones that are the most pertinent really to the environment and what our bill covers. So the targets on biodiversity on land, there was the target in the Environment Act to halt decline in species abundance by 2030. And then on December the 16th last year, they added to this target. So they flesh out the targets with what's called statutory instruments. And these are the laws that actually create more targets that feed into the Environment Act. Now, they're not primary legislation. The Environment Act is what's called primary legislation. And then these additional targets are called statutory instruments. And that means that they are considered to be weaker because they can be changed without votes to Parliament, depending on the type of instrument that there is. So this is always the problem with additional targets when you've got an act that comes out, because some of the targets could be changed just because the Prime Minister wants to change them. But hopefully they won't change these targets, because they've been in a lot of trouble because the net zero strategy didn't meet, was deemed unlawful, and there was a lot of press around that, and so they wouldn't want that same sort of press to be to happen around the environmental targets. So this target to ensure that species abundance in 2042 is greater than in 2022 and at least 10% greater than 2030. So just to break this down a bit, species abundance is the numbers of populations within populations. So it's the numbers of sparrows, the numbers of hedgehogs, the numbers of chalk grassland species. And that list of species, it's not infinite. It's based on a list that they've published within the statutory instrument of 224 species. So it's not all encompassing, it's not holistic. The other thing about it is that this target is just measuring those numbers. So it's measuring individuals, and it's not indicating the overall health of ecosystems. So it's not looking at peatlands and saying, are they functioning, or is the river now functioning? It's looking at how well individual species are doing within those ecosystems. And we've been talking to a lot of ecologists recently about this, and this isn't the way that they would like to see these targets being measured against. Because the thing that's important is the health and functionality of ecosystems. So when I say functionality, I mean, like, for example, in our peat bogs, how are they functioning? Are they actually absorbing carbon, which is one of the most beneficial aspects of peat bogs? They're the biggest carbon store, and they're quite depleted. So to look at the ecosystem as a whole, we'd want to be measuring, whether it's functioning, and whether its biodiversity is really diverse, not that just a few species are doing well. So our COP pledge, the UK's COP pledge, was to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. And what this target is doing is it's halting nature loss by 2030, but it's waiting until 2042 until we get a reversal of at least 10%. But what's weird about it is they slung this 2022 number in there as well. So that's a baseline of 2022. And this really, we can't understand how this can possibly work, because how do you increase on 2022 and at the same time get 10% by 2042, 10% more than 2030? This is all very odd. But you can see here what the Wildlife Trust, none of the NGOs are impressed with this target. The Wildlife Trust said that the England Priority Species Index, that's what they're basing it on, has been declining by approximately 2% a year. So you can see how much that might decline by 2030. The ambition of only 10% increase on 2030 means the target could result in less nature in 2042 than we have today. Well, that's highly likely with a target like this because of the rates of decline. So the target on habitats, that target is to restore around 500,000 hectares. And it sounds a lot. And that's a range of wildlife-rich habitat outside current protected areas, and that's by 2042, compared with levels now. But just to put that into perspective, that's about 2% of UK land, and golf courses cover about 2% of England. It's about around 3.8% of England. So it's only a little bit more than all of our golf courses. We could easily turn those into nice nature reserves. But the government says that 26% of land in England is already protected. They've been saying this for a while, but that's quite misleading. They're saying that contributes, so they're well on the way to their 30 by 30, which is that's one of the things that they signed up to at COP15 as well. And that means 30% of land will be restored by 2030. But that 26% of land that's protected isn't protected for nature, and it's not managed for nature necessarily, sorry. And only around 3% of it, the wildlife trusts have worked out that only around 3% of it in England and 5% of it in the UK is actually in a favourable condition for wildlife. And if you look at the total area of land, the biggest area of land in the UK is used for agriculture, and that's 70% of the UK. In a minute, I'll show you a map on land use. But 70% of the UK is around 18 million hectares. The UK in total is about 24 million hectares. So you can see where most of the land's being used. It's not where we live. It's not where we work. It's agricultural land. And the majority of that land, the majority of that 18 million hectares is raising livestock. And the Climate Change Committee, as well as a lot of other committees and bodies, say that we've got to reduce meat and we've got to reduce livestock production in order to release enough land to meet our climate and nature targets. So Climate Change Committee are recommending 20% initially, reduction in meat and dairy by 2030, and 35% reduction of meat by 2050 to release around 4 million hectares, roughly 4 million hectares.